the Arab world obviously has, had a pretty rough time in the last few decades, particularly the last 10 years. We in the West associated with a lot of conflict. So it's their way of saying, look, we are a normal country. We can do these big, popular, fun things.
Now, the 2022 World Cup kicks off today when the host Qatar play Ecuador at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Well, we know it's been a contentious choice of venue ever since it was announced back in 2010. But how much do we really know about Qatar and the Gulf states' relationship with football? Let's speak to Richard Spencer. He is the Middle East correspondent for The Times. He's been in Qatar. He's been speaking to people. Morning, Richard.
Good morning.
I was reading your piece, and it's really interesting, the kind of behind the scenes. I mean, nothing more to start with than the fact that there's actually not that many Qataris population-wise in Qatar. It's mainly migrant workers.
Yeah, it's. I have to say that for a lot of people will be sort of looking at Qatar for the first time, and I guess a lot of sports correspondents will be going to Qatar for the first time, or fans as well. And I've been going for 12 or 13 years now, and I've got to know the place a bit. And I have to say it's a very odd place. It's not a normal country by your and my standards. It's it's a desert that goes to the sea. It's a peninsula sticking out into the sea, and until the modern age, if you like, until the 19th century, it was just part, the people who lived there were part of the tribal federations of the Arabian Peninsula, who settled in, small villages, fishing villages, pearl diving villages, and then suddenly got hugely rich in the middle years of the last century when oil and gas was struck. And, in the case of Qatar, they've got 320,000 people Qataris living there. And they've imported 2 million people to, build their skyscrapers, run their services, run the oil industry and the gas industry particularly. All the expertise is foreign, or the workforce is mainly from the subcontinent. So it's a very sort of surprising and unusual place. Not, like it has to be said, like Dubai, Abu Dhabi, they have the same sort of structures.
And so, I mean, you ask in your piece in the paper, who is this World Cup for? I mean, are Qataris excited by it? I mean, clearly migrant workers are, but I'm guessing they don't have the cash to go and buy a ticket.
Yeah, as always, when you go and ask people on the street what they think about things, what you always get is this incredible range of views, So you think, what a Qataris thinking, oh my goodness, Qataris have, as diverse opinions as the rest of us.
Of course.
It's always worth reminding ourselves of it. So I think a lot of Qatar is quite nervous. It is a conservative society. They've built this extraordinary society sort of bit by bit and got used to it, but they have a vision of what a million football fans looks like, and I think we can.
Oh, I think Richard's line might have dropped off there for a moment. I think we'll try and reconnect with Richard. It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, when you ask the question, what do Qataris think? I mean, as in, what are people telling you? Because you can get a sense from speaking to people whether there is a general enthusiasm. Interesting, there seems to be some reticism. You can understand that, can't you? Particularly if you're looking at headlines of maybe, English football fans in the past certainly don't always have the best reputation abroad. It'll be really interesting to find out more. Oh, I think Richard is back with us now. Hi, Richard. I think we just lost you for a moment.
Yeah, sorry, slight glitch there.
No, not a problem. Sorry, carry on.
Oh, no, I was just saying that, on the other hand, I think, Qataris and it has to be said Arabs, right? So people in the Arab world particularly do have sort of a multiple identities more than perhaps we have. So they very much identify as both Qataris, as Arabs, and as Muslims in the majority of cases. So I think that there's quite a pride in Qatar and also in the Arab world more generally that look, we're doing something that the rest of the world does. That we host big sporting tournaments and we can do it well. Hopefully, it'll work. And the Arab world obviously has had a pretty rough time in the last few decades, particularly the last 10 years. We in the West associated with a lot of conflict. which is, on a long-term historical basis, not is unfair because they have no more conflict than Europe has had in the last 100 years. So it's their way of saying, look, we are a normal country. We can do these big, popular, fun things.
Do you feel that Qatar is being criticised, not necessarily unfairly, but more so than other nations that probably are as bad or worse?
Yeah, so I have very conflicted opinions about this because I've been very critical in since I've been a Middle East correspondent of a lot of the issues that have been talked about, migrant rights, for example, and migrant workers' rights and their working conditions are terrible across the Gulf, and I've tried to draw attention to that in the past. So it's a good thing. I think that there's this huge focus on the way the workforce is treated in Qatar. On the other hand, I can understand their sense that this is a bit capricious. As I say, this is not new. This is how the Gulf cities were built. When we go to a Formula One race in Abu Dhabi, when we go on holiday in some luxury 5-star hotel in Dubai. They've been built in the same conditions, and indeed, this is common throughout the world. I don't suppose the laptop I'm, talking to you on Zoom now, made in China. The phone I speak to you on, that you're all using to listen or so on. I don't suppose those working conditions are any better. I used to be a China correspondent, and I can tell you, working conditions in Chinese factories was pretty grim. And of course, their human rights issues also the same. And yet, everyone went to the Beijing Olympics, and there was a tremendous triumph, and everyone talked about how China had come out into the world. So there is a slightly capricious sense that there is a sort of new focus on these things in Qatar.